emoji, past, present, and future. It's a bit of an experiment. I set out to do the entire thing in emoji, but as you'll see, I failed. And by the end, I know that you'll be able to figure out what that means. So the first thing is that we are trying to record this. It's a bit of an experiment. I will ask you to put your cell phones and laptops away because I don't really care if you are reading your mail while I'm talking, but I need the bandwidth. So there is a link in this presentation, and we'll send out that link so if anyone's curious, so there's no need to write down anything as we go along. So let's start with the past. We'll start not quite that far back. We'll start in 1982 with emoticons. Now, one thing people do is they often confuse emoticons and emoji. More formally, emoticons are things made up of punctuation, or lately, very inventive combinations of Unicode characters that we'll see being used, especially in Japan, for different faces or expressions and so forth. And these are called emoticons. We'll go forward to 1999, and we'll visit another country. And in that country, we start to see emoji characters. So these are colorful little images, cartoonish, that are encoded as characters on each of the three major Japanese telephone systems. Now, all of these images are approximately the same, but unfortunately, when these got encoded as characters, they all had different numbers internally. So that meant that it was always a mess to try to transfer text between one system and another. Now, even worse, there are cases where two different characters had the same code. So if you were trying to deal with some unnamed shift-JIS code that you got from someplace, you wouldn't know which of these you were dealing with. Now, where does Unicode come in this? I'll say a couple of words about that. It's the way that essentially all text is represented on computers. Every cell phone, every computer that you will see or likely to see, except for the ones in the museum a few miles from here, is going to be encoded in Unicode. And because it is this pervasive plumbing, it's very important that we make sure that everything works right. Now, our major focus in Unicode has been on scripts. So these are the characters that people need to write their languages. They're what they need to write a message in Armenian to a friend of theirs via email. But we also encode a number of symbols, about 5,000 as a matter of fact. So if we take Unicode, we see that there's been a huge growth in the use of Unicode. Up through the 90s, it was mostly used as a lingua franca inside of databases. Systems had started to produce it. There were some systems like Windows NT that were using and based upon Unicode. But when the web hit, all of a sudden these siloed systems had to talk to one another. And we see an explosive growth of Unicode during that period. And here's a slide from this past year, hitting about 81%. And this, if you include Unicode UTF-8 plus Latin 1, you're seeing that it's essentially all of the text. So let's go forward to the year 2000. And we got a request from Symbian, a fellow named Graham Archer. And what he said was, well, we've got these emoji appearing in Japan. We should add those to Unicode. Well, we looked at this. And we decided, well, we couldn't really say whether this was a flash in the pan or whether or not it was going to be some long-lasting use of characters. So at that point, we turned it down. We'll go forward to 2001, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The Gmail team inside of Google approached a group of us, which were in a group inside of Google, that were dealing with Unicode issues, and they needed to deal with these Japanese systems, and they needed to do it soon, because they wanted to take in all of this information that was going on the email systems of the Japanese carriers and handle it. And since all of their software was based on Unicode, they needed a Unicode solution. So I think Marcus Shearer, Kat Mamoy, is he in the room? And Kat, we started taking a look at this. Derek Tong worked on this for Gmail. And we started looking at what a Unicode solution would be. So we then approached the Unicode committee and said, look, we have this issue, and a lot of other people are going to have this issue having to deal with these emoji characters. Okay, so, well, we'll get to that. The animation broke here. So the Unicode committee looked at this and said, well, it's worth broadening our scope and looking at these emoji characters and seeing if it makes sense to add to Unicode. So a script subcommittee was started. Marcus, I think, was the chair at the time, and we started to look at that, and we ended up getting approval by the Unicode consortium to go forward, and we started the heavy work of trying to put this all together. And it's remarkable just how long it takes to correlate all of these things. Now, at the same time, and the iPhone started using what are called PUA characters, private use characters. That's where the devil comes in, for dealing with this on Unicode systems. But as we all know, private use characters are a very flawed approach to how to deal with these. So Unicode is starting to work on the process of putting these actually in Unicode. So in 2010, in Unicode 6.0, we added emoji characters for the first time. And we also mapped some of the Japanese characters to characters that existed previously in Unicode, like the smiley face. So roughly 144 characters were mapped to characters that had been in Unicode before 6.0, and then some 500, almost 600 characters were added. And in 2011, as we know, the iPhone came out with emoji. At first, this was limited to Japan, but then as we see, these started to escape out of Japan and spread worldwide. Then we added some more faces. And we also added the ability to control the presentation. So if you had a character that was in Unicode, there are some circumstances where you just wanted to see that as that normal black and white smiley face. There are some circumstances in which you wanted to see it as a colored image. And especially for the characters that had been already in Unicode before 6.0, it was important to give people a way to deal with that. So we came up with a mechanism which is called variation selectors that allowed people to indicate which form they wanted. Let's go forward to Unicode 7.0. And in Unicode 7.0, we added some more characters. I don't have a colored image of the hand yet, but we added about 250 new characters, pictographs, which could be used as emoji. And at that point, or actually just before, we had come full circle because the 3 Japanese carriers agreed that they would push forward with the Unicode solution instead of keeping their shift-just solution.